Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Art of Podcast. I am Bradley,
I'm Charles.
and today we're talking about engineering. I was about to say engineering again, but I guess I don't know how things are going to go. But behind the scenes, we record.
Yeah.
We don't record things in order necessarily. So this one is more work oriented. We've
That's
done
right.
one about school, so now this one's more work oriented. Okay. So, yeah, I mentioned that I have two icebreaker kind of questions to start with. So a simple one. If you didn't get into civil, what was your next option for engineering?
Oof. That was a long time ago.
What do you think it would have been anyway? Like even if
What
it's
would I
changed.
have wanted it to be?
Don't remember exactly what it was, but let's say you had to go back and not do civil. What would you go back and do?
Probably mechanical.
Yeah,
just because they're
mechanical
so
was-
similar in a lot of ways.
I
right?
was very close to putting mechanical above civil. I was like,
That's interesting.
it was.
Well, your GPA was pretty high too, so you probably would have gotten into.
I think
mechanical
civil was
if you-
had the higher grade cutoff
Oh really?
for like the first time in like a decade or something when
Oh
I
wow.
went in. Yeah, either way, neither of them are overly hard to get into at U of C. But my thought process was, in my mind, most civil jobs you work on cool projects. I figured most mechanical jobs you don't. When you end up working on cool projects, they are cool. You know, you work for
Yeah.
Lockheed Martin on like fighter jets, like that is
Right.
way cooler than most civil jobs, right? That you can have.
Right.
But to get there, you're working on watch batteries, HVAC,
Yeah,
right?
Can
Like
you imagine doing HVAC? In
Yeah,
a building,
like,
man?
no.
I'd be so bored.
Yeah.
and I feel like that's where a lot of mechanical engineers kind of go to because like you can't just design a fighter jet right
No.
off the bat.
Yeah.
Like you need to build up some.
And if you are the one lucky ones because you had this crazy GPA and your final capstone project was probably related to it or something, right? Like,
yeah.
or like,
You'd have to be lucky.
yeah, or like there are some kind of neat ones. Like working for Garmin would be neat, doing like GPS stuff, but that's mostly software, and I'm not.
How would
savvy.
that be mechanical?
I think they have mechanical options and stuff, but it's more of the. I think it's more of
Okay.
your techie side of mechanical.
Okay.
Like mechanical does have to take a lot more coding based courses than we do. Not a lot of them, but a lot
Right.
more, right?
I think something like cars would be much easier to get into, but then you have the whole issue of I don't think Canada really Canada manufactures cars, but I don't think we design it.
Well, that's the thing is I don't think Canada has, to my knowledge, what my mind considers a cool mechanical engineering job. I feel like you got to go to the States, to like Houston,
There's
California.
a lot of oil stuff. Like if
True.
you're designing like propellers for some
True,
like oil,
but you
I
can
don't know how
but you can
refined it
tangentially
works,
do
but-
that with a civil degree too. Like in the oil, you could be working in the same field. With a
I don't know if
civil
you could
degree.
design propellers.
But you'd be in the same
As a s-
field, and I'd argue you're
Yeah.
working on cooler things in that field. You're working
Yeah.
on flare stacks and
Right.
whatever, right? Yeah.
So we both say mechanical.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, okay.
Not, and if you didn't get into engineering at all,
Computer programming.
computer really,
But I only realized that I liked computer programming
through engineering,
during my first year of
Yeah.
engineering, right? So
Is
that
it
it's like that
something
would have been
you would have enjoyed
the
doing
same.
as a career, or was there something you really liked those couple courses of doing?
Because
that's where I'm
we just
struggling
took
with.
one C++
Yeah.
course and I liked it a lot. It was fun, but I have to say I don't know. I feel like my job wouldn't be varied enough if I was just sitting around coding all day. Like I feel, again, I've never worked as a coder, but I feel like a career in engineering
Yeah.
would be much more varied, and
Yeah.
you'd be doing a lot. You'd be doing a much bigger variety of things as
Yeah.
opposed to just
Yeah.
I don't
totally.
know. What would you?
I don't know. That's tricky. I feel like it would have went in one of two ways. I think I would have either been like, oh, I'll go to school a bunch. I'd become like a doctor or something, or I probably would have went into like financing.
Okay.
And
Well,
work
you
for, like,
you were
hedge
in
funds.
business
yeah,
right
yeah.
before.
But
you
I wasn't in
transferred.
financing. I was in like more generic stream. I can't remember. Yeah, but
Okay.
but financing and work for like some like hedge fund or something, dealing with like billions of dollars in your portfolio or something like that. I think that would have been cool.
Right. Right.
Once again, though, I think I enjoy it more personally for myself than I would enjoy it as a job, right? You enjoy playing video games. Doesn't mean you want to stream video games 8 hours a day, right? Like,
Right.
You're
Yeah.
gonna lose out. You're gonna lose steam pretty quick. So I think
Yeah, for sure.
I do think a lot of the stuff, even like programming, I enjoyed programming as that course, and I enjoy doing mild amounts of it. Sometimes I mess around or whatever. Haven't in forever, but like I don't know if I would. Like you said, maybe it's the variety. But I don't know if I
Could be
would
the
enjoy
variety.
doing that.
It could be the
Day
fact
in,
that,
day out.
like, to me, what's really appealing about engineering, or one of the things about it, it's a profession. It's not just a job,
Yeah.
right? So it's like the fact that engineers are licensed and they practice under guidelines, right? Like that to me, the idea of that is cool. And I don't know, comparing that to a job where you don't do that, where you're not licensed, where you don't practice, like
like doctors have that. Like
doctors have that for sure.
And financing, you have to get certifications to be licensed in certain things too and stuff. So I wonder if that is like a correlation there.
Maybe. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, that was it. Cool. So we'll go over that. So today's mostly about work.
Yeah.
But we decided to get there, we should maybe discuss how our schools handled civil.
Yeah.
Because I can start and I can say like, civil's broad. I assume it's the same for you, where you had to take a project management course, a transportation course, a structural course,
geotechnical,
a hydrology. You have to take at least one of everything, right?
It's a huge umbrella term.
Yeah. So, sure. But on top of that, like my school had specifically a geotechnical program.
Subdiscipline?
Like, civil, mechanical, chemical, geotechnical.
Oh, so geotechnical wasn't even under civil.
It was a discipline. Oh. Yeah, it was a whole discipline.
Oh, wow.
But I think it was more software, like geomatics. Oh, geomatics engineering. Yeah, which did handle. Not the same not the same. Yeah. Okay. I saw a meme and it was like if engineers were Pokemon types or whatever. And it was like structural is like ground and steel or whatever, and geotechnical is ground and like tech or whatever, right? Like something like that, right? Yeah, that's kind of, there is an overlap, but yeah, it's not massive, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, Dal split your civil degree up into two subdisciplines. There was water and environment, and then infrastructure. So water and environment was all the hydrology, all the hydraulics, environmental was in there too.
Yeah, we had to take one environmental course.
Yeah, and then the infrastructure was structural, geotechnical, transportation. You could kind of pick which courses you wanted within those three and still get that infrastructure specialization.
Did you not need to get it? Could you choose to not get a specialization and just do it general?
No, you had to pick. You had to pick either water or infrastructure.
Just going back really quick, geomatics also includes surveying and stuff, so there was some overlap.
Okay.
Yeah. And then, for us, we had specializations. We had to choose those in your first year when you were choosing which discipline you wanted to go into. You had to apply to that, and your options were. They changed it recently, from what I hear, but your options were biomedical specialization for civil engineering, which is
that's
odd.
Weird. Yeah, that is weird.
And the other one was environmental, or something, or environmental remediation or something. And then in your third year, you could choose a minor, and your minor options were structural or transportation. Okay. But they've also recently introduced a digital minor, which I don't really understand what that means for structural or civil, but
no idea.
Yeah, whatever. Okay.
So they did that. What were your minors again?
Structural and transportation.
So there's no geotechnical.
There was no geotechnical, no water. You could choose to take extra. I did take extra courses. So structural required geotechnical. It required you to take all the geotechnical courses available, all the structural courses available.
Well, what about all the hydraulic stuff though? Like
none of that. No minor required you to take all those, but you could. For me, for instance, I did take more hydraulics ones, right? And then like on my resume, I can say like structural engineering, or my cover letter, right? Mention extra courses.
That seems bizarre to me, because I would say almost half of civil in industry is municipal water stuff, right? So why I wonder why UFC wouldn't include that as a minor. That's really bizarre to me.
We dealt with a lot of that between fluid dynamics, hydraulics, geotechnical 1, geotechnical 2.
Yeah.
Like there was a lot of
I mean, I took water courses as well. I took like a dam design course. Yeah. I took hydrology, but it seems weird to me.
I also don't know why transportation was a minor when the only requirement for that was you had to take transportation 2 and road safety. And that was the only two above and beyond your normal degree.
I really don't understand.
Whereas structural required you to take structural 2, to take concrete design, steel design, geotechnical 2. It required you to take, and then it required you to take either environmental 2, specialty concrete, or project management.
Well, and all those 2s you just mentioned had prerequisites, I'm guessing.
The 1s and stuff.
So it's even more than that.
So I'm saying like structural 2 or structural minor was like it focused your degree. You only had room for 2 or 3 extra courses. Whereas transportation was like take these two easy consider like road safety is considered
Yeah.
like one of the easiest civil engineering courses you could take.
I fundamentally don't understand why they would include that as a minor and
But not water.
It doesn't make any sense to me.
I think project management would be a viable minor too.
Yeah.
I think that should be.
Yeah.
I think you should have a minor for each of those, like geotechnical, structural, transportation. You can include water and geotechnical maybe in the same one ish. Environmental probably should be one.
You brought up project management, which is interesting. I think we kind of talked about this before. You don't necessarily need to be an engineer to do project management. Like there are like 2-year program. Well, there's SAIT has a 4-year degree in project management, but you don't it's not an engineering program, and it's like that's right. So do you even?
I wonder if engineers are more highly regarded though when applying for a PM job.
Probably, probably, but it's not like it's. Yeah, I don't know.
It's not life or death in that situation. Yeah.
You didn't have a project management minor?
No, but I did take all the project management courses available.
Oh, really?
It was
I
something,
took one. I thought it was so boring. I hated it so much.
It was something that just clicked to me.
Interesting.
And I ended... Well, I think I told you, like, I ended both of them with over 100% because... Like,
that's ridiculous.
In the first one, I, like, answered a question 2 different ways because the question was vague or something. And like, there's 2 different ways you can interpret it. And they gave me bonus marks. Like, okay, you noticed an issue. And then in the second year, they had 1 bonus question and 1 midterm. And I got that bonus question and I got nothing. Like, I think I maybe lost like 1 point on an assignment or whatever.
That's
so I ended with like 102%.
Insight to the listeners here, Bradley is too smart for his age. It's fucking ridiculous.
It's the size of my head.
Way too smart.
Quadruple XL.
Yeah. Okay, so that probably finishes up the school part.
Yeah, well, that just talks about how broad civil is, right? So you could probably just kind of go into that. Because like we're kind of talking, as you can kind of tell by all the different courses you can take, civil itself is really broad.
It is.
I would make the argument it could be the broadest discipline of engineering. I would say mechanical, maybe.
Here's the thing: I don't know much about industrial engineering, but that to me as a concept seems so vague that it could really apply.
Or like
to
materials engineering, because you could like do civil. You could do like concrete with that, or like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like fluid. I don't know. Yeah.
I don't know either.
Okay, sure. Yeah,
but
it's one of the more broad
ones.
It's not specific. It's far from specific. It's not like you're like at U of C we had software and computer engineering. And I'm like you're splitting.
We had that at Dell too.
So you're splitting the techie side into
that's
right?
right. That's right.
And then electrical on top of that and stuff. And,
yeah.
Oil and gas.
Oh wait, you split up software and computer? Is that what you said?
I think there was software engineering, computer engineering, and electrical engineering.
Oh,
so like
wow. Okay, Dell was just computer and software were together, and then there was like power.
Because like software or computer would be somewhere between software and electrical, you'd think, kind of, right?
I always just thought they were the same thing, but I don't know anything about electrical. So
yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, civil's very broad. We just listed you can do project management, design, geotechnical, municipal. You can do oil and gas. You can do mining, environmental.
Yeah, mining's a whole thing too.
Yeah,
I guess that counts as. Dow actually had a separate program for mining, but most people I would say counted it civil.
Yeah. So yeah, you can't count on 2 hands the amount of different areas, and then within each of those areas you have consulting, contract, like construction management, project management, design, right? Like you have 4 or 5 different things you can do with each of those. 10 different industries, so like
so maybe that can be where we transition. You and I actually both work for the same company. We both do consulting. So we can talk about that.
Okay, let's start with asking you, how do you define consulting?
How do I define?
Because people know what design is. People know what project management is, I would assume.
I gotta say, having this job for 3 years, whenever people ask me what I do, it's like really hard for me to describe it because it's such a bizarre job to like explain to people. Have you experienced that? Or? Yeah,
because people are like, oh, you're like a designer then or something, or you're like a safety guy. It's like no and no. Right? You're the designer / government representation on site to make sure the job is done according to pre-established criteria, whether that's special provisions, standard specifications, drawings, whatever, right? And you're also there to handle on-site technical issues related to those. Not related to like the machine broke down, it's technical, but related to those things I just mentioned.
Yeah. Like when when I try to explain to people what I do for work, their first sort of reaction is like, okay, so you walk around and you tell people what to do, and I'm like, no, it's not that we tell people what to do, it's that we tell people what they have to do. And I would say maybe the difference is that if they disagree, then they can throw that back at us, and now we have to come to a compromise. That's what I would define as consulting.
And I would also say it's about what the result needs to be, not how to get there. In general. You don't care about the method.
I would say how it gets there is important.
To a degree,
what
sure.
What if the method contradicts with what's in the...
Sure, I guess I follow that. But, like, you don't care how they get the chamfer on the concrete. You just want the chamfer to be on the concrete, right?
Yeah,
like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like, how do you want us to do that? Doesn't matter. Just do it, right? Like, as long as it looks good at the end and meets what's required.
For some more basic things, for sure, but it's like...
But you're not there to hold their hand. You're not there to boss them around. You're not their boss. Because that's another thing, right? We don't have power to tell them. We don't have power to tell them what to do, really, right?
Well, because they don't work for us, right?
No.
We're a separate company, which is that's the whole point, right? So it's...
And we're not contracted above... Like, it is two separate contracts. It's not like a contract that has two companies that gives us authority over one, or vice versa.
That's right.
In fact, in a lot of ways, they're still kind of your boss, because, like, they'll be like, oh, you have to... Not like you're... There's a dynamic. Both sides can tell the other side a bit what's needed, right? Because they tell you, like, we need you to inspect the rebar. Boss wasn't the right way to put it, but...
I don't know. Well, I would say the spec is worded such that it's like the consultant has the last say.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like
true. Yeah.
Almost every third sentence that in the document ends with, or as determined by the consultant.
I just mean, like the contractor could say, hey, I need you at 7 a.m. to inspect this rebar.
Oh.
And, like, you know what I mean?
You have to accommodate that.
It's like not boss, but, like, there is accommodation on both sides.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. But you're two separate entities that have to work together, which adds that dynamic too. Because the contractor isn't necessarily looking out for you. The contractor's looking out for their bottom line.
Right.
And you're looking out for the spec.
Yeah.
And those two things kind of disregard each other by default. By definition.
Well, having the companies be separate entities too is useful, because now there's no conflict of interest.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I was see, we have to, this is going to be a tricky podcast for us to do, because we have to be...
You don't want to tell stories.
We want to stay professional.
Yeah.
We don't want to reveal too many details about our job.
Yeah.
So we just figure out...
You don't want to give too bad of a bad story about some contractor saying something or whatever, right?
Well, so I was on a job.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll just have to be vague about it. I was on a job where... So what part of our job is that we record what happens every day, and then we compile, like, weekly reports.
Yeah.
And then those reports get sent in, and the contractor has to pay site occupancy. So every day that they're on site, they have to pay, $1,000, $2,000, right?
Yeah.
So, this one project that I was working on, did we mention that we do bridges?
No. Okay, we do bridges. Okay. We do consulting for bridge projects in particular, whether that be a rehab. Define a rehab. A rehab is maintenance on a bridge to varying degrees, right?
Right.
To replacing bridges to whole new bridges.
Right.
They vary on scale from a little canal project that I'm on now. It's a whole structure replacement. It's a short bridge, small bridge.
Yeah.
You can take out and rebuild a whole bridge in a 6-month period, less than a 4-month period, to the Bow River project that we're on, where it's a 300-foot tall, half a kilometer long bridge with, like, a curve to it and sweep whatever, right? And that's literally takes 2 years just to pour the deck. Just to give, like, a scale difference, right? So
we do bridge consulting. This one bridge project that I was on, there was a bit of an issue with site occupancy.
To give me context, can you just write down right now which one it is?
Oh, sure.
Yeah. Well,
yeah. Okay.
it might help if I just have some context to. Yeah.
Okay. So this one bridge that I was on, there was an issue with site occupancy. The contractor didn't want to pay the site occupancy that they had agreed to initially, and there was kind of a back and forth between them and the government about wanting to pay, not wanting to pay. And we had a meeting about something that was unrelated to that, but because it was COVID, pretty much everyone was on Teams.
Yeah.
I actually went to the side office to take part in the meeting. It was just me, the superintendent for that contractor, and then a couple of the construction guys. Everyone else was on Teams. So when the meeting concluded and Teams was turned off, we started talking about the whole site occupancy issue, and the superintendent, once he caught wind of the fact that I was the one compiling these reports and sending them in, because he didn't want to pay because how it works is like, so the government gets these reports and they see, okay, the contractor did this today.
Yeah.
Right? We're going to charge them site occupancy because they
and
were
charge is weird, right? That you bid on a pool. You bid on how long it's going to take you. There's a pool of money, and then each day a portion of that money is taken away. So when the project's complete, you either owe some or you're going to get some.
Right. But for sake of simplicity, it's
you're charged.
Right. So once the superintendent kind of caught wind of the fact that I was the one writing these reports, he tried to get me to not actually write anything in the report.
Yeah.
He like, even though they'd be working during the week, he tried to get me to not say that they were working on the reports so they wouldn't be charged site occupancy, right? So now this is where us being separate entities becomes useful, because if he was my boss, if I was working for him, I would have to do what he says, because
even if you were a different company working for him.
Yeah.
Right? That's the thing too.
But now that we're separate entities, like, I could push back and say, like, no, like, I have to write these reports. If you guys are on site working, I have to put that down. And we kind of went back and forth on it a little bit. It wasn't too, it was intimidating, but it wasn't too intense. And after a while,
it was intimidating by the nature of it, not necessarily by the person.
And I think he felt that by the end of it, he kind of felt that he had overstepped.
Yeah.
Because that is, in my opinion, that's a pretty big overstep for you to ask a separate entity to not do their job.
Yeah.
Right? So he was a little more apologetic after that.
Yeah.
But that's the utility of us not working together as the same company. They need to be separate, so there's no conflict of interest there.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, but they also get in situations where a company might ask you, like, how they should do this, or how you should go about doing this. And you have to be careful, right? Because as a separate entity, I don't think your insurance covers the same things as the contractors would, right? And then you can risk being held liable too.
What do you mean? We have liability insurance.
Yeah, but like, if I was to all of a sudden grab the concrete chute and start pouring concrete myself, is that covered by our liability insurance?
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Right? Like if something bad came out of that.
Yeah,
right? Not that I've done that or I've ever been asked to do that, but as a basic example, right? But like, but you have to also be careful when a contractor asks you for recommendations, right? And that's where the engineering lingo or the professional fields, right? Where you say like, I would do this, or like the non-answer kind of like, it's you're maybe guiding them to their own conclusion without telling them outright, right? Like, I think that could work or whatever.
I would say one of the most difficult things about the job is the fact that like we're pretty unexperienced. Like, I graduated 2 years ago, right, and now I'm consulting with contractors who are twice my age, like in their 50s, and they've been consulting or they've been in construction longer than I've been alive, and now all of a sudden I'm talking to them, trying to come to a compromise when they obviously know more about construction than I do, which makes it really intimidating, because you really have to know your stuff. You have to know the ins and outs of like the codes, the specifications, so you can use that as backup for what you're saying to these people who are twice your age and have way more experience in construction than you. But
that's why our boss knows the spec off the back of his hand.
Oh, for sure.
You need to just through attrition.
When I was starting out, like we have our boss who's very active in each project that he's a part of, right? So I would say, when I started out, whenever a question was posed to me, whenever the contractor came to me with some issue that they wanted settled, I would almost always deflect it to my boss, because I just didn't know what the answer was. I wasn't experienced.
You don't even know where to find it in the spec.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Yeah.
Right? So definitely the most challenging part about this job has been to do that as little as possible, because I feel like the more you do it, the more you just deflect everything the contractor asks you to someone else. I feel like the less they respect you. Yeah. And then the less it makes me feel like the actual consultant.
Yeah. Right. At the same time, too, I think it's also important. You don't need an answer right away, right? Like, I think some people would tend to try and at least guess what the answer would be. But it's actually better and safer and smarter to say, like, good question. Let me get back to you.
Yeah.
20 minutes or something.
Right.
Let me get back to you by the end of the day.
Whether that means you just text your boss and ask him what the answer is, or you actually try to look it up yourself, right?
Yeah.
Like whichever works. But no, it's there's a lot there. When we talk about the spec, what we're referring to is the Alberta Transportation Bridge Construction
and
specifications.
The highway specifications too.
Yeah, that's
which also.
It's basically just a giant book of rules saying that this is what has to happen on
literally
construction sites.
500 pages long,
Yeah.
font 10, like just tiny writing, right?
And
like,
I would say essentially our job is to be on site to make sure that everything that's in that rule book is done, even though we're going to have to come to compromises on a lot of
and
things.
that the hierarchy is followed, right? Like people might start going to the spec and then realize, the special provisions being the contractual obligations, right? Might actually require something slightly different.
Yeah.
Too, right? Because you're going to find... You see something about bridge rail, and you're like, there's a section in the book about that. And you turn to the specs, and you just default to that being where the answer is. But in reality, maybe that was something in the contract, wanting something different, right?
Right.
So I think it's being aware of that and making sure that that's followed. And the drawings too, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the drawings drafted by the design engineers and given as part of the
package, the tender package or contract package. Yeah. So
Yeah.
that's consulting,
Yeah.
kind of defined for everybody.
Yeah, I hope we weren't too vague there. Like like most people are gonna have no idea what we're talking about.
I think in a lot of ways too, the job's reactive, right? It's when it's a reactive job. The contractor gets something done, then we have that. Like we have to check that, right? Like there are some active and proactive parts to it, and there's a lot of those. But there's also a large segment of the job that's reactive,
right?
Which kind of adds another element that's hard to explain, right? Because I think most people are used to like, no, you have this deadline to get this done. But in reality, it's the opposite. You can't get something done until a deadline, right? Like that's sort of the difference there.
For sure.
And then, but at the same time, it could be an intense job. Like I know quite a few times where I've been yelled at by 5 other contractors, all being twice my age, like you said, and threatening that I'm sending concrete away, and they're like, "You're gonna have to pay for that concrete, Chuck," and just swearing up. And this is an actual example, by the way. And we're pouring, and they're like, and then like another guy's like, "You're the only person on this project that cares about that concrete having the right slump," and I'm like, "That's why I'm here. Thank you."
You just
literally the only
job.
like that's literally the largest reason why I'm here, because I'm the only one that cares.
Did someone actually tell you had to pay for the concrete?
It was the bridge engineer on a project.
Oh, that's shit.
And then
you literally just bring up the sentence in the spec where it literally says like the contractor is responsible for rejected concrete.
Yeah,
it's like it couldn't possibly be more.
The best part was like, so it was him. It was the laborers were. There was like a subcontract that was doing the like finishing, and I told them they had to stop, and they're like, "You have to act. That's not us. You have to tell the framers that they did something wrong or whatever, right?" So I went to the framers who are part of the prime contractor, and they said, "That's not our problem. You have to get the finishers to fix it or whatever." And then I was like, "Kate, you're stopping pouring then." Like, I don't care which. It's not my job. That's the thing is, we're actually not supposed to go directly to the subs. We're supposed to go to the general contractor. Right. So then they tell me to go talk to them. So I'm like, fine. You guys are done pouring until that gets resolved. I don't care who fixes it. It just needs to be fixed, right? And that's when they started saying...
So to elaborate on what you just said, on every project there's the general contractor, which is the sort of the main construction company that's responsible for everything. And then they hire subcontractors to do work.
To varying degrees, depending on the needs of the project or the size of the company. Because some smaller primary or general contractors don't have a concrete finishing crew, but some larger ones would, right? So you'd sub out that if you're a smaller company.
And so we have no say over what the subcontractors do. Yeah. If we have an issue with what they're doing, we have to push that issue through the general contractor. And so it's really weird to me that in this story, you said the contractors just told you to go to the
It was the end of a project and they just
didn't give a shit. Yeah.
And then, then like, laborer foreman was like yelling at me for the concrete stop pouring. The pump operator was yelling at me. The concrete like QC guy was yelling at me. The bridge engineer was yelling at me. And I'm like, guys, and then like that's when the bridge engineer was like, "You have to pay for this concrete." And I'm like, "No, I am not." He's like, "I'll send you the bill." Well, he walked away to call his boss, and the other guys are still yelling at me. I told you this, and then he comes back kind of like dragging his feet. He's like, yeah, the boss said you're right. I'm like, thank you. And then things went, they didn't want to talk to me afterwards, but things finished properly, right? But you do have these like heated moments like that, and it is scary because you're on another company's grounds, essentially, right? Like, you know, like it's you, maybe one other person in your company, some other person on your side, so to speak.
Then everyone else is the
versus everyone else, and in that situation, it was me, one other person on my side, versus 5 or 6 full-grown 40-year-old men yelling at me.
Yeah.
And in addition to the 10 that were there that were clearly on those guys' sides. Just and again, you're outnumbered, right? Like 15 to 1, and you're like,
and I would say it's difficult to hold your ground, and it's also difficult to remain assertive and professional, right? Because if you're getting yelled at like that, it's really it's tempting to kind of just like give in, stop being assertive, or maybe just be disrespectful and just
yell back and interrupt them and stuff, right? So how do you handle that?
Yeah, so for the sake of professional behavior, like you have to maintain your cool. You have to continue to be assertive even in the face of being yelled at like that. And it's definitely not for the faint of heart, I would say.
No, it's not. Yeah, if you're thinking of the pacemaker, But it does have moments that I think are fairly unique to consulting. Right? Where
for sure.
There is like, you're kind of the sole person between one thing and another, right? And you have to correct or veer or something, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I gotta say in general really quick though, contractors I work with that has only come up 1 or 2 times, those situations.
Most of the ones I've worked with are hilarious. Like there's so
I want to clarify the stereotype, and that is so you assume stereotypical construction worker, right? Like catcalling, drinking beers on the job, whatever, right? I found they're not like that. Some of them have some like inappropriate senses of humor, and you laugh, but it's fine.
Sense of humor is probably the stereotype that's actually true.
But they're not
pretty
actually,
much all the ones that I've met have a disgusting sense of humor.
Yeah, but they're all like funny, and they're not mean and gruff. They're like relaxed, and the amount of times,
like, well, they're professional about it. They're not just gonna tell some disgusting joke to you on the first day that they met you. It's like you develop a relationship with them, and then their sense of humor comes out, and that's fine. Yeah, I kind of like that actually.
I find that they're actually like polite a lot of the time. Like a lot of the time, they'll say, "Oh, we're placing rebar," but they're like, we don't really want to make you come in on Saturday, so like we'll find some stuff to do, and if you can Monday, you can check the rebar and stuff. And of course, you could say like, no, it's okay, I can come in Saturday or whatever. But like, but they respect you. They will want to get along with you. A few of them, you actually develop like kind of a friendly relationship with and stuff, right?
And if you do that, if you do develop that friendly relationship, I feel like it's so much easier to work with them.
Yeah.
Because it's easier to compromise, because you're not mad. You're not as mad at each other because you don't actually hate each other to begin with. You actually, you know, in a professional sense, you are fine with each other, right? So it makes it easy.
The difficulty though is then you have to keep that separate from your professional obligations, right? And that I never really had to take that up as a thing, but like, but it's something to be aware of. Right?
I would say the biggest thing with that is you just have to be very careful with how you word your sentences. Yeah. Like as an example, I was the spec for 2020 says that so when you're pouring concrete in cold weather, you have to wrap up whatever you're pouring with tarps and then heat like the enclosure so the concrete stays warm as it's curing. The spec for 2020, that used to be 14 days, and then the 2020 edition extended that to 17 days. So a lot of contractors don't know about that, right? So we had this one bridge that I was working on. We had just poured, we had poured like an element we had poured a concrete like 2 weeks ago. So just a couple days before that 14-day period, I went up to like the foreman and I said like, hey, are you aware of the new 17-day requirement, right? What I didn't do was go up to him and say, you have to heat this for 17 days. Yeah. Right? I posed it as a question that invited a discussion.
It's a leading question that appears to give them the benefit of the doubt.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. Right. And then so his response immediately to that was, I'm not doing that. Because if he wanted to get rid of the tarp so he could continue on with his work, so extending that an extra 3 days would hold back his work. Yeah. And he immediately was like, no, I don't want to do that. So then that's kind of where you have to, as the consultant, you have to think on your feet and be like, okay, well, how do I respond to this? I just kind of hinted that he has to do something and he doesn't want to do it. So what do I say? Yeah. And then I was like, So I kind of asked him like why, why don't you want to heat this for another 3 days?
Yeah.
Again, phrasing something as a question, giving him an opportunity to explain himself, even though in the moment both of us know that whatever I say goes, just because the rules are written that way, right?
Yeah.
And then he was like, well, it's it's gonna hold up my work, and I was like, well, it's Thursday right now, so you're really only gonna miss out on Friday because you're not gonna be here working over the weekend, right? So is that really such a big deal? And then we eventually just settled on the 17-day requirement. So the point I'm trying to make is that so much of maintaining that assertiveness and that professional relationship with them just comes down to how you phrase your sentences. You don't want to walk around like you can just tell them what to do. You don't want to act like that because you'd be a terrible consultant if you did, right? You have to be humble. You have to be diplomatic.
Yeah, it's interesting. And then there's also what you say goes. We had, actually, we both have, you're aware of the contractor I'm talking about.
Okay.
Wet curing 7 days or whatever, and then they're like, well, it has been 7 days. We poured Wednesday evening, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday.
It's
Tuesday
like,
at 9 a.m. It's like, no,
Wednesday.
You don't count. You need to go back to the same time of the same day of the week. And they're like, well, the specs are vague. And I'm like, no, they're not. But you can't say that, right? You need to be more political about it. So you're like, no, so then you explain, no, the 7 days being one full week, right? And then the one full week would be the same time, the same day, right? And they're like, well, that's not how I interpret it. And you can't just say, well, you're wrong, right? You gotta coach them and convince them of it.
Well, because it's if you finish your pour at 6 p.m., right? You don't count it as a curing day starting from 8 a.m. because the concrete wasn't even poured at 8 a.m. So you would include that as a curing.
Think of it as 7 24-hour periods.
Yeah,
right. 8 to 8, 8 to 8, 8 to 8, 8 to 8, right? Exactly. So you need to get back to that 8 on that same day next week.
Right. Yeah.
So situations like that too, right? You can't just say, nope, what I say goes. The contract says 7 days, up to discretion of the consultant, right? But but you need to explain why you also got to that conclusion.
Yeah.
Even if it seems obvious to you, right? Like, to me, I'm like, it's
while being assertive, but also diplomatic and respectful, right?
Yeah.
It's a tricky balance for sure. Yeah.
There's
I would say consulting, you're constantly walking a fine line between being overly assertive and sort of cocky and unreasonable, and then being as assertive as you need to be and being reasonable and not cocky, right?
Definitely one of the sub-disciplines of civil engineering in particular that requires the most social skill and adeptness. I think there's a social element to it that isn't prevalent in any other civil industry, and I think in almost any engineering discipline.
Yeah.
Except for consulting and other
disciplines. Pretty much every engineering discipline requires things to be built or manufactured. So you're also then coordinating with the people who
there is a consulting relating thing in every one, and I think that's the most social.
For sure. Well, because you're working with people who are conflicting with you. Like, the people you're working with every day their interests conflict with yours almost every single day, which is not the case if you're working for a design firm where everyone is on your team and you're all doing the same thing for the same reason, right?
And I think you and me are fairly non-awkward engineers as far as I can name a few people in my graduating class that could never be a consultant.
Oh, no.
By definition of character, right?
And it's not just the awkward people too, but it's the people who are too cocky that could never make it.
I'm an engineer, turn your nose up kind of, right?
Yeah, exactly. Those people would make terrible consultants, right?
I think the reason, time for a little bit of humble brag, that we do okay at consulting is the same reason that we're doing this podcast. Right? It is, right? We're both...
For sure.
You might disagree with someone. This isn't something we disagree on, but some of our podcasts are things we disagree on.
Right.
But we are still able to sit down and compromise or hear each other's sides and stuff, right?
Yeah, being open-minded, being respectful.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you want to finish with pros and cons of consulting, or?
Yeah, I feel like so
let's talk about what we like about it. And what
I do like the socialness of it. I am a fairly extroverted person, so I think going off the socialness of it, it's nice to have regular communication. You see that more or less depending on the project and the contract you're working with, right? For instance, project I'm on now, veteran crew, they know what they're doing. I have a much more passive role, right? Like, it is like, they've been doing this for more years than I've been alive kind of situation, right? And not to mention that it's also a crew that's actually kind of stuck together, right?
Right.
So my role, they know the spec, right? So I just have to make sure that I have to double check that, like what they're doing is right and everything, but like there's a lot less questions from them. It's more of, here's what we're doing, and I look and I say, yep, makes sense to me, right? Like it's less of a, it's so. They run pretty smoothly day to day, right? Whereas I've been on projects where it's a very new contractor and there is a more active role, right? I have to be a little more careful of. I'm not saying I'm not careful with a more experienced contractor, but you have to be more careful. Things that are normally almost outside of your standard scope as a consultant, right?
Yeah.
You maybe do want to check that like they're doing things in an order that kind of makes sense and stuff, right? And that they're
because
kind of
more
staying on
experienced
schedule.
contractors, obviously, when I say the word trust, I mean it's like you can trust them a little more to do the work right, but that doesn't mean that more inexperienced contractors, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't trust them. It doesn't mean that their intentions aren't good. It just means that their relative lack of experience could make things more difficult for them.
You're trying to help them. You ask them those leading questions you were talking about that make sure that they're aware of, like there's more of those to make sure they're aware of stuff in the spec, or maybe to make sure they're aware of like some potential scheduling problems and stuff too, right? Whereas a experienced contractor, you're like, you guys should know to schedule a project at this point. Like I'm not like it's not on you guys at this point, right?
Right.
So it's definitely less social, right? On my current project, but which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but yeah. Anyway, the extroverted part of me, I think, likes the more social dynamic introduced.
For sure.
Yeah.
What I really like about it, what I would like about it, what I say I would like about it the most would be the amount of responsibility that we're afforded.
Yeah.
Right. Like we have our boss who essentially oversees everything, like every project that his company is a part of. But in terms of the day-to-day consulting, like we're the ones who are out there every day, checking up on things, doing sort of your sort of average consulting.
Your boss, the boss comes for like meetings and high profile objective completions.
Yeah.
And you maybe talk to him on the phone a couple times a week kind of thing.
Right.
But like it's fair, there is a trust that is given to us to get.
Yeah. We are left alone to do a lot of things, and I really like that about the job. It's as someone who, and you can obviously relate to this too, as someone who strives for responsibility.
Yeah.
It's a really nice job in that sense.
Especially compared to other like intern and EIT, especially or the jobs you likely get out of school and stuff, right? Like you're talking like concrete testing, right? Like that's the HVAC of civil. It is, right? Like and at that point, I don't know. Yeah, maybe there's some responsibility, but it doesn't feel as lofty of a responsibility, and you're not seeing as much. Yeah, that brings me actually another pro. You see a lot. You see every side of it. You interact with project managers. You interact with the construction management side. You're dealing with the structural design. You're dealing with that side and looking at it. I think what other segments are there? But you're seeing most things, right? You're seeing concrete. You're seeing timber, less so, but you're seeing asphalt, steel. Like you're getting a physical representation of the things you went to school learning.
Yeah.
More so than concrete testing.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
for sure. Yeah, as far as like every discipline of engineering has sort of those entry level EIT positions where you're kind of made to do the things that PN just don't want to do because they're tedious or whatever, so they just shove all their work onto the EITs. Yeah. As far as entry level civil jobs go, I would say we got one of the better ones. Yeah. Right? Like I know a lot of people who did concrete testing as their first job, and my God, would I hate that.
First of all, from what I understand, you're pretty lowly paid.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know.
But also, and it's just this redundant, like, you're another situation too of you work for the contractor. If the contractor wants you there at 6 a.m. for a concrete pour, like your life during the summer is just like you get phoned and you're like, by the way, tomorrow you need to be here at some weird time, right? Like then you're going back but it's just this like you're doing concrete tests, they're never fast enough for the contractor, so you're being yelled at, and then you're like going to like it's I don't know, it's high stress, and I don't think the reward is high enough for it from what I understand.
For sure. And personally, I don't know. I don't want to shit talk concrete testers too much, but
Let's do it. Let's go.
I don't know. It just doesn't seem like a rewarding job to me. Like when I go to work, there are plenty of days where I feel like a huge sense of accomplishment, and I don't know if I would feel that if I worked as a tester.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So I really do think we lucked out.
Yeah.
I feel like I lucked out getting this job as a first sort of post graduating job.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any more pros you want to talk about before we get to the cons? Or?
Yeah, I think I think it kind of goes with that trust thing and stuff, but consulting isn't as strict of a. I sort of like the ebb and flow, right? Like it's it's a con, I guess, that we can get to, but it's very flexible but very inflexible. I think we've talked about this.
Yeah,
before, right? It's hard to explain, but like your day to day is fairly flexible, right? Like if you need to leave an hour early for something, it's fine, right? Or if you you're just tired from like the previous day was exhausting, you can sleep in that extra half an hour. You're not right? Like there isn't this four set B that says you need to be there from 8 till 5.
Right.
5 days a week, right? So it's flexible. Like you want to leave a little early on the Friday because X, Y, or Z.
Right.
If there's nothing going on that day, this is all your day to day. You're like a standard day where like you're there, you check with the contractor. It's not a whole lot going on. Not that your standard day has a whole lot going on, but but at the same time, con, I guess we could transition with that.
Right.
Is it's also very inflexible at times.
I would say it's like you said, it's flexible day to day, but it's very inflexible long term when it comes to planning for things, right? Because it's like it's happened to me so many times. Like our job makes it really difficult to plan for vacations, as an example, because it's like if something. Because every phase of construction is planned out initially, right? But as it happens all the time, shit gets delayed.
I just want to clarify: if you want a week off to go somewhere, the boss will kind of make that work and stuff. But if you want generally, right? But if you just want a Friday off to go camping or whatever with friends and kind of a little more unofficially,
I would disagree.
Okay,
I would say that we both work for the same companies, so I would say if you work for a smaller company where there are less employees, and let's say it's a busy year to the point where you have more jobs than you have actual employees,
fair.
I would say it's way more difficult to actually even just take a week off. Because I don't think, because what if something important ends up happening that week and everyone else who works for the company is occupied elsewhere?
I would say maybe it's the fear of that too, right? I've had time off. I know people that have had time off, and I've never actually had a situation where I've had to cancel time off last minute. But there's the fear that could happen. Right?
It could happen.
It could happen. So I guess it's inflexible.
I guess it depends on when you plan for your time off. If you plan for time off in May or June, good luck, because so much shit is happening in May and June, right? And I would say most of the summer. If you're planning for time off in the late fall or the winter, you could. Make
I would say
work
the hardest
easier,
time is actually August, September, when you late July to early September when projects are typically.
In my current experience, I would say that May, June is actually
We're
worse.
also on inherently different projects, right?
Sure,
I'm right now on more rehab-based ones out of town, which have to end by September, so that's a crunch time.
So on the project that I'm on, we've been working all winter, and we've had all these things be delayed because of the cold weather. So all these things that are weather dependent are all planned for May, because May is when it starts getting warm, right?
But I think the other inflexible side is, and this is less consulting and more of the nature of construction. So the field side of it is, the concrete pour is running late. You had supper plans at 6:00.
Screw it.
You have to cancel it. You have to be.
There's nothing you can do. You can't just leave, right?
So there's those situations, right? Or you have on the bigger jobs, especially when the contractor kind of cares less about your time. They don't have that as, it is we want you to do a rebar inspection at 8 p.m., right? And you just need to make that work.
And then you get there at 8 p.m. and it's
they're not ready until tomorrow morning, so you could have stuck with your plan anyway for your update or whatever, right?
I hate that shit.
That's sad. Yeah, I'll say one story. We were on a job, and it was can you show up at 9 p.m.? Can we do this inspection at 9 p.m. or something like that? And we're this is so for a pour the next morning at 6 a.m. We're yeah, sure. So we stuck around until 9. We went and got supper and stuff and stayed in the area because we lived an hour away or whatever. And show up at 9 and they're not there. And they're we figured we wouldn't get it done. So we're actually going to come back and just finish it. We didn't forgot to tell you, but we're just going to finish it at 5 a.m. So you have to come back and check at 5 a.m. We're like,
Yeah.
screw
that,
you,
5
right?
in the morning
like,
too.
There's something
Like,
like the
hell is
pour was
wrong?
at 6:30 or something,
Yeah.
so we had to be there. Like,
First of all, that's not enough time to fix any actual issues.
yeah,
It's
one
like you're
second.
gonna have to delay
Really?
the pour
You
if you
keep
find
us
some
there
shit.
until like 9 p.m. Like we were there for like 13 hours,
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
and literally spending the last 5
Yeah.
just filling time.
Yeah.
And then we have to come up, like, then we got to go home and sleep for 6 hours and come, right? Like, it's very inflexible suddenly. But
Right.
I do find, once again, we have two different sides of this. On the smaller projects that I'm typically on, that is a lot less common. And they're typically more predictable
Yeah.
because we have one rebar inspection, one deck pour, right? Like, there's like one of this, and you can kind of narrow down where the week is that's going to be.
I would say even on the larger scale projects, because I'm working on like new bridges. You're working on rehab, so
Yeah.
I would say even on the larger scale projects, that it still depends on the contractor and what they're like. Like if you have a contractor that's like always very last minute about things, and it's like things have to be done now,
Yeah.
right? Then yeah, it can be frustrating.
But that's
to
the
deal with.
nature.
But if the contractor is more organized and they actually go about kind of warning you about things in advance, and they're not trying to make your life inconvenient for the sake of getting things done quicker, like
But that's sort of the
Yeah.
opposite of like the law of economies of scale, right? Like I think construction, as it gets bigger, it's harder and harder to manage. So it becomes more last minute.
difficult to manage for sure. I would 100% I would agree, but it still really depends on the attitude of the consultant.
Yeah.
The attitude of the contractor.
I will say, the project I'm on now, the contractor, he's like, I don't want to work weekends. I don't want to work late. I have a kid that I want to spend time
Right.
with. And,
Yeah.
and he, I think, in turn, understands that his, like the foreman or the laborers under him and me all have
Yeah.
those same opinions, right? So
Right.
I think you like having someone like that you're working with. And it's not that they're lazy and don't want to work. It's just that they have a work-life balance that they care
Yeah,
about. And I
for
think
sure.
a lot of contractors are happy to disregard that. Especially
many,
high up,
so
but
many.
they don't need to
Oh,
be
yeah.
there. The ones here's the thing, on the big projects, the ones making the calls and choosing the schedule often don't have to be there
Oh,
the
yeah.
whole time.
Yeah, they
Right?
just order you around from their homes.
Yeah, or they'll
Like,
they'll show up for the first half hour of the night pour that starts at 6 p.m. So like
Yeah.
they'll come before supper quick, go home for their supper plans, and then just leave us all on site to deal
Right.
with it.
Yeah.
And then they'll show up at 9 a.m. the next day and like stretch and everything with their contract. But they don't. Yeah, they get to just order what needs to be done from the office or from their house, maybe a bit in the evening or whatever, right? But they don't
Yeah.
need to be on site for the whole duration of something.
It is really frustrating.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Which I guess is, that's all kind of, yeah.
It's part of it. I mean,
Yeah.
it's part of it. Like, we have to be there. If they don't have to be there, why would you, right?
Yeah.
It sucks. It's cold. You know.
Yeah.
That's for me. That's another con. I hate working outside. I hate it.
See, I really like
People are
outside.
always like, "Why would you want to work in an office? You'd be stuck at a desk all day. Don't you want to work outside?" And my response is always, "Working outside when it's cold is not worth working outside when it's warm. It's not."
Okay,
like
fair.
I personally, and I'm not saying this generally, but me personally, I hate working in the cold. Like I
Yeah.
get so cold. I'm diabetic, so my circulation is bad. I'm
Yeah.
sitting there in 3 layers, like freezing
Yeah.
my ass off, and it's just,
Yeah.
it's tough.
Once again, we're speaking on different things. My projects slow down a lot in the winter. Yours do too, but they don't grind to a halt. My intent to.
Yeah, I
Kind
still
of
have to.
more
I've,
involved.
I've had to be out there almost all
Yeah,
winter. It's just
But yeah, I don't mind. Here's the thing: no matter what job I have, whether we'll start talking about like what we want when we start our own company kind of thing and stuff. But like, I want a job where I can be on site once in a while. Like that is an important element of civil
Sure.
engineering for me. I think.
But like
That
every
was-
day.
Yeah, it doesn't have
Yeah,
to. Right?
that's
Like,
the thing.
But
It's like
um,
we're our job is a side job. We're on site every day.
and I don't think that's
what we have to
necessarily a bad thing all by itself until you start saying like the cold and stuff. That's what makes it maybe a bad thing, right?
do. Yeah.
I don't think that being on site is necessarily by definition a bad thing. I think it's sometimes for people what comes with
Sure.
it, right? In your situation.
It depends on your aspirations too, because maybe here is where we can transition, unless you have other comments.
I just want to say one more thing about outside. That was actually a reason of choosing civil. I'm like, this is a job that isn't as lethargic, right? Like it's
Okay.
not. It's the engineering discipline that's the least likely to result with me being like obese, essentially, right? Like that's kind of what I was.
Okay.
Yeah, that's
Fair
kind
enough,
of what
yeah.
my conclusion was. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
That's fun. Yeah, so like I said, it kind of whether or not you want to be working a side job also kind of depends on your aspirations. Like if you aspire to be a design engineer, someone who does more technical work, does more math, does more office related stuff, you definitely you wouldn't want to be on site all day.
No.
You'd want to be doing office.
A lot of design engineers do go to site
occasionally,
fairly regularly. I'll say, and that's relative to other office jobs, right?
Yeah.
I know that like design engineers often have to like do like a pre-site we've seen like the consultants, the designers that we work with and stuff, and they come for like every other week for like a meeting or whatever and stuff. So I think you probably end up spending 2 or 3 days a month on site, especially if you were to be like a low PEng or EIT. You'd probably be spending almost a week worth of time outside every month.
Which is what I would like.
That's a nice mix.
It is nice. Yeah. It's like I do definitely aspire to be a designer and to have more of an office oriented job, but the idea that I can still go out to site and see and experience my design getting built, like that is a really, really cool
I know a lot of senior engineers in design have their like lower engineers deal the site visits for them, but I would definitely be a senior engineer that would be like, no, I'm going.
I'd like to think I would be, for sure, because it's that aspect of like you're going to site, like you have this design that you've been working on for months or years or whatever, and then you want to go out to site and actually witness that being built,
and usually the companies are more than okay letting you too, as long as it's not just
what's required.
It's required for some. But like even like some huge like 10,000 cubic meter pour, something ridiculous, right?
Yeah.
They'll be like, like it'd be good for one of us to go there and just check on things for that.
Oh, for sure.
It's a good, because it's a relation, right, between you and the contractor too, making it known that you're not just this like mythical creature hiding behind the scenes, right? Like that you never see.
If you have your PBE and you're safety oriented, I don't think anyone can actually tell you that you can't be there.
No, I'm just saying like a design company might say like you can't go on site all the time. Like we need you to do design work and make like. But I know like when designers bid on jobs, actually in project management we went through this a bit, when designers bid on jobs, they often bid on like, they'll say like, this project we're hiring out, you give a quote, right, to some contractor or whoever's your client, and you'll say, okay, we'll charge $130 an hour for the engineering work. We estimate 40 hours of design and 3 full days on the field, so 3 10-hour days, let's say. So they'll say, we're going to charge you 70 hours. And that's in the bid. It's like they bid to get paid for some site visits. Right. And sometimes your like client would come back and say, that seems excessive. How about 2 site visits and we just send you weekly picture reports or something, right? Like, there is like a back and forth there. Yeah. But generally you are bidding with the assumption there's going to be site visits. Because you want there. And mind you, it's also the more hours you can get out of a client, the better, I guess, too, right? So,
well, there's always there's also the there's an element of responsibility in that as well, because as the designer, you do want to be on site, making sure that what's being built is according to your design.
Well, let's be clear too, right? Not every industry has consultants like us.
Yeah.
Sometimes the designer kind of doubles as a part-time consultant and does have to go once every couple of weeks just to see if things are going
Even within civil, man, like bridge engineering in particular is very meticulous and intense. I've talked to buildings engineers who have said like, I go to site like once a month. Yeah. And it's like, and especially the ones who are like the PNGs who have to stamp sort of like site reports and stuff. It's like you have to stamp, you have to put your signature on a document saying that this was built to your design, while not being there to check on your design every day. Like it's intimidating for sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. I think that's kind of an interesting thing about civil though, is you can have like any combination of site and office work that you want.
So we said civil is kind of an umbrella term.
Yeah.
If I would narrow down my interest on one part, it would definitely be structural.
Yeah.
Would you share the same?
Probably. I think project management also has. Oh, need to pause it quick.
Okay.
We'll pause it. Gotta take a call.
Yeah. Be right back. Okay. We're back.
We're back.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry. So we had to stop there for a phone call. So kind of going back, you said a design job's definitely something that appeals to you particularly, and I was kind of saying, design's interesting, but I do think a lot of these, like project management, I think would have something that could be interesting. The one thing I would say though is like geotechnical is the no-go. I have
really
zero desire to do that, and I think you've kind of even spoken like you don't want to do like canals and stuff. You want to do like structures.
I mean, I want to do structural. Geotechnical is very similar to structural, so I wouldn't mind doing geotechnical work.
Yeah.
Like if you're designing, if you're the designer on a bridge and part of your scope of work is designing like the foundation, like the piles, I wouldn't mind.
Would you want to be doing exclusively piles though?
No. That'd be awful.
Yeah. Is there any parts of structural? Is it buildings in particular for you, or like do you want to do like dams or oil rigs and stuff? Or
really, any structural would be nice at this point for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I would lean more towards bridges, not just because I have experience in bridges, but because
the intricacies kind of involved.
Well, I feel like with like buildings is also cool, but the thing with buildings engineering, it's like you have to coordinate with so many other disciplines. Like you have to coordinate with electrical engineers, with mechanical engineers, architects. Well, you're kind of the architect's bitch too, from what I understand. It's like maybe phrasing it that way isn't the most politically correct way to phrase it, but it's like if you're a bridge designer, it's like you're the guy. There's no one you have to report to. It's like you are the guy.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Whereas I feel like you working on buildings, you kind of have to report to the architect. Which is like, I mean...
Is that the way, or is it the other way around?
No, I think it is.
Do you
that
design
way.
something and the architect has to put skin around it, kind of matching?
No, it's literally like, it's the architect sort of designs the layout, and then you have to make that layout work.
Or you tell them it can't work, and you have to figure something out.
There's definitely there's an element of consulting in there, for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I'm sure there's companies where it's more of an equal playing field, too. It's less of like, it's more collaborative, the whole process, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Lots of different areas of structural though, like even if we're going to talk about structural in like an oil and gas kind of capacity, there's like you have to design like steel supports for like all these equipment that's right, like it's even that would be cool. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm kind of similar. Environmental doesn't sound super appealing.
No, I don't even. I don't know if I would consider environmental a sub-discipline of civil. I would kind of consider it its own thing, because it's
maybe. I guess the connection would be like open water canals and stuff. I guess that's probably where the connection lies.
Yeah, but I feel like the environmental engineer wouldn't actually design the canal. They would just make sure that the design.
No, I'm just saying there would be like that's where the baton gets passed, kind of.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know much about environmental.
Yeah. Okay. Then the last thing, I guess, we want to talk about future company, but the last thing before that, I think, is, do you think engineers in general are underpaid as an industry?
Yeah, I think you gotta break it down by. I think design engineers are underpaid. Like I think if you look at the typical structure of like your average engineering firm, I feel like the project managers make way more money than the design engineers, which personally, I think that's backwards.
That almost is backwards, because the designer is responsible for literally the structural integrity of the project.
Yeah, I feel like that alone should mean that you should be more compensated, because you're taking on more. The responsibility that you're taking on has more to do with public safety than it does with making sure that the construction finishes on time.
Is the difference are project managers paid more though because their job is inherently not necessarily like 8 to 4 or whatever, 9 to 5?
I'm not sure the exact reason. I would guess it would be.
I'm guessing that's part of it.
I'm not sure. I really don't know. I do know there is like design engineers sort of on average are definitely paid less than project managers.
Yeah.
Which I don't agree with.
But you also hear the stereotype of like the girls like, oh, gotta like marry a guy with an iron ring kind of thing, right? Like live rich and everything, right? Like your like Tinder profile comment is like looking for that iron ring or something like that.
People, especially living here in Calgary, because like engineers in Calgary who work in oil and gas make a fuck ton of money, right? So I feel like when I tell friends of mine when I tell people that I'm an engineer, and they ask me how much I make, they're kind of expecting me to say like $75,000 or $80,000.
But that's not that's not an EIT thing.
Well, EITs in oil and gas make that much.
True, yeah,
right?
but literally nowhere else.
Right.
It's not
well, yeah.
any
so
other
I feel
discipline.
like being an engineer in Calgary specifically, it's like the expectation of you being an engineer, the expectation of how much money you make, is sort of conflated with people who work in oil and gas, and it's probably not the same.
I think just the prestige attached to engineering, right? Like it's this high end degree that like the knowledge is a grueling thing to go through.
Right.
But a lot of early career engineers, I would say across the board, it's the rule, not the exception, right? Like I'd say oil and gas is the exception.
For sure.
That low, and I don't even mean just EITs. I mean even the first 5 years of being a PNG or whatever, right? Like you're not making handful of fists, screw you money kind of thing, right? You're making more than the Canadian average, comfortable, but not necessarily enough to compensate all of the 4 years of school you went through. It's not until mid-career where that really takes off.
It's not until the point where you really start taking liability and responsibility for your designs, right? I would say that's the point where you start to make more money, which is like, so as an EIT, I'd say we don't really make that much more than your average like business analyst with the same level of experience as us, right? And it's like, I don't know. I mean, it sucks. It sucks that we had to go through such an awful program, and right. Like I hate school just as much as the next guy, but like, does our salary coming out of school have to reflect our program at school, or is it more so associated with what you'll be doing? Because we don't, as EITs, like your average EIT doesn't take on a whole lot of responsibility.
I would say the average EIT takes on more responsibility than like an entry-level business analyst, though.
I don't know anything about business, right? But it's, if that weren't the case, and we don't take on really more responsibility.
A design EIT actively designs things. It just has to get reviewed and stamped.
But that's the thing. It's like we're not actually taking responsibility for it, right?
But you're using more engineering knowledge. I don't know. Yeah, I think it's something that I feel like a lot of degrees, and this is not a lot. There's of course ones that are the exception to, like nursing and stuff. But a lot of degrees, even if you didn't have that degree or education, you could probably figure out the job eventually. You might not work as well, but you could figure it out and do it. And engineering is definitely an exception to that. Nursing 100%. Is definitely an exception to that. But like there are exceptions, and that's not exhaustive, but there's exceptions where like some sort of like I can learn how to do accounting.
Sure.
Right? Yeah. I don't need to go to school to become a tax person to do my taxes, right? Like I could probably even start saying people pay me $50 and I'll do your taxes in tax season with a layman knowledge. Engineering, you're not designing any element with layman knowledge, right? Like
for sure.
You wouldn't even know where to start. You wouldn't even know what to consider.
Well, if you look at job applications, I would say your average job posting, for like, I don't know, like an HR representative or just your average sort of when it gets down to the educational requirements, it's very vague. It's like you need a degree, or you need a degree in this very wide range of areas, right? For engineering job postings, it's like you need an engineering degree.
In particular, civil or mechanical or whatever.
From an accredited... Yeah, you need a specific kind of engineering degree from an accredited university. No diplomas, nothing like that. It's like you need...
I feel like EITs in general aren't paid that much more than like an HR representative or whatever to necessarily make
I don't know. I don't know how much they...
I'm also...
Yeah.
I do feel like it should be bumped up. It should be... Their engineering, the way I describe that is a lot of people get small raises throughout their career. You know, they start at a decent amount, like massage therapy.
Okay.
Right? You start making 50%, the owner, the business gets the other 50%. So you do a $100 massage, you make $50, business makes $50. And that maybe scales up to like a 65-35. So you might get an extra $15 a massage, which is an extra 30%, right? Like teachers, you start off and your wage might double by the end of your career and stuff. Engineering, your wage can literally quadruple by the end of your career, and like without being that unreasonable.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's one where your growth prospect is ridiculous. And I feel like it would be okay to like lower that growth prospect slightly just so you start off a little higher. But yeah. I don't know. Because I feel like that also add to job security for larger companies. If you aren't rapidly making more money, people won't be like, oh, I can just fire you. Once you get your P-Eng, I have to pay you this much more, and statistically. Mm-hmm. But you're not necessarily taking much more. You can stamp things now, but like you've only been a P-Eng for a year. We can just hire an EIT again in first year, and like a first year, second year EIT, and pay them way less. Whereas if that was a little less extreme of a scale, that would probably even the playing field a bit more. I mean, the argument from the other side would be people will just hire P-Engs instead of EITs. If they don't have to pay them much more, they'd hire someone, pay them a little bit more for the extra security, I guess. I don't know. Yeah.
I wonder if part of that even is just like even if you're hired as a P-Eng and you won't be stamping anything because you just got your P-Eng, I feel like even just being a P-Eng and having that designation on the work that you do for the company, like maybe that,
because there's some things you can stamp, and they would have you once you're a P-Eng. I'm not saying day one, but like they would have you in the process of like, here, you've been working on mostly this throughout your career as an EIT, so like we're gonna get you to stamp this one, but we'll like co-review it with you or something, right? Like we'll co-stamp whatever it needs to be, right?
Even if it's just like correspondence and like emails and shit like that. Like if you're signing off on your work emails as a P-Eng,
you more decisively answer as an authority, right?
Yeah. Maybe that's what's more appealing to. Yeah. I mean, we don't have our license. We're not P-Engs, so no. But yeah,
that's interesting. Okay, last topic. You and me have often talked about starting our own engineering.
So this does relate to pay in a little bit.
Okay.
Because I feel like we both agreed engineers are a little bit underpaid. Yeah. Even late career like design engineers are kind of underpaid.
Yeah.
I feel like if you get into private consulting, if you start your own consulting firm, if you start doing your own engineering work, like the sky is the limit for how much money
like I just said, right? You charge like $130, $150 an hour for design work. But like that doesn't go directly to designers typically, because that gets bled through your accountants and through your P-Engs. Your P-Engs don't, like, your billable hour is the person working, but you have all these sub people that aren't directly working on it in billable hours. You're like I said, your accountants, your any sort of like management and stuff, right? And management makes more than design engineers, so you're making $130 an hour, and most of that's going to the management overhead for your building, right? So like, a very small fraction of that 130 ends up going to the average engineer. Yeah. But if you have your own company or your own practice, you charge that directly to them, and you get that money back directly.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So that's where I think the most significant jumps happen, and you hear of very niche consulting and design engineers doing their own business and charging. I was reading some article about, I forget what the niche was in BC, but it was like $320 an hour.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Because the more niche the area is, the less competitive you have to be in what you're charging, right? Because if there's only, I wouldn't even know what numbers to say.
And there's the built-in assumption too that there's not going to be consistent work. So the few companies that are competing are all inflating their costs to make up for downtime.
Right. Yeah. So we have some pretty cool ideas.
We have
our own sort of some cool ambitions for our own consulting company. We can talk about that a little bit. So we have kind of a two-pronged idea. We want to start off we're thinking about starting off as sort of an engineering firm that designs and manufactures trusses.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Wood trusses, maybe even like steel joists too. Yeah. Right? Like, I don't know, we get a warehouse. You know those warehouses that's like it's a warehouse space.
It's a quad set almost.
And then there's an office space. We can work out of the office, and then in the warehouse.
The requirement I have said is it has to be purchased stuff though, because it's assets. When you're paying off the land, you're building asset. You're not just paying rent. Yeah.
I mean, it'd be nice if we can get to the point where we can actually afford to buy a warehouse and not just rent one. Yeah, that would definitely be nice for sure.
Well, it doesn't need to be a large warehouse. Even long trusses, like 40 feet or whatever, right? So
yeah.
It doesn't have to be a 10,000 square foot complex, right? It can be literally a 60-foot long Quonset with offices in the back, or whatever, right? Yeah.
So now, in terms of our time day to day, I feel like this wouldn't take up a whole lot of time, because you have your you have your pre-engineered truss
The
designs
standard
that
designs.
you've worked on already, and like a client will come to you and say, I just need a wood truss that holds this amount of force. You have your standard truss that you've designed.
Your 22-foot truss with a 16-inch overhang.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
So then you just give them that. You can maybe have some custom sort of, like a client could come to you and be like, I need some custom designed truss. Then you
Oh,
then
totally.
You would have to work
Well, that'd
on
be the fun
Yeah.
part, right? But
Oh,
you
for
would
sure.
you would have to say like you need to order at least 20 of them, or else you're paying for at least 20 of them is the equivalent, or whatever. Right? Like I don't know I haven't done those numbers, but like you would need a minimum price. They'd have to pay, whether it's a fixed premium or whether they have to buy a certain amount of trusses and you include it for free, right? Like you would have to figure out a system, right?
I would make it a fixed premium, because if they don't need
fair.
the amount of trusses, like if their amount of trusses is less than the minimum, then it's
true.
Right?
You can maybe offer them incentives on that premium if they're ordering. You know, if they come to you and say like, I need 300 trusses for a warehouse, maybe you disregard the premium at that point or whatever, right? I don't know how much. I don't even know how long it would take to design a custom truss. Like, is it just like, okay, fine, the premium is like $1,000, right? Does that cover the amount of time to go in? Depends on the size of the truss and stuff.
What we're gonna talk about is all just dreams and ambitions.
We have had some serious conversations about it.
Oh no, for sure,
but we haven't done it's not immediate enough for us to concern ourselves overly with numbers other than broad assumptions.
Well, we don't have the amount of experience either to actually know the ins and outs of what this would look like. We're
and how long
just
it would
thinking
take and stuff,
right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
We've done math on like the profit per truss. We've done some like back of the napkin kind of math on that.
Sure, yeah.
Compared to like trusses, like how much you could charge for a truss, how much it costs to make it and stuff. We've kind of done that math-ish before.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the idea would be that can go on while we're working at another job to a degree, right? Like you and me could pre-design 24 different standard trusses, and then have a contract out a carpenter or whatever to bang them out, and we can do that fairly passively, maybe 4 or 5 hours a week on our end between like each or whatever, right? Like one evening a week or something. And then
to fill in the rest of the time, right? Because we would.
Was that what? Are we starting that while we're at? Are we getting that off the ground while we're working a full-time job?
Oh, you wanted to get into that? Yeah. Yeah. So the question is like, when do we launch this?
Yeah.
Trust.
Like obviously we're
company,
PNGs
right?
at some point.
Yeah.
We're going to have to get into that argument. We've both disagreed a little bit on the time frame, but at some point, being a PNG, that's not 20 years, right?
Yeah.
Like a early to mid like a mid PNG career, right? You don't need to be 55 years old to be doing this, is what I'm trying to say, right? We would start this to some degree.
Yeah.
And the question is, do you quit a job cold turkey to do that, or do you work a job full time and keep this to evening work?
Yeah. Like, what is the point where you actually quit your day job to start doing this full time? To me, it would be the moment that you buy the warehouse and you actually start manufacturing trusses.
Or the moment
that way.
You have like a certain standard deviation of orders every week. You know what I mean? Like if you're within a certain, like you have a pretty tight idea of like your growth trajectory of orders. Okay, because the first week you'll have 0 people. The next week you're going to sell 15 trusses. The next week you're going to sell 1 truss. But eventually you'll get to the point where you're doing 30 and then 32 and then 35 and then 36, right? Like the numbers get tighter and tighter as it becomes more consistent. And I feel like at that point is when you look at, do you quit? Now they have a reliable source of a seemingly reliable source of income.
I mean, I think what matters too is the amount of work that you have to be doing. Like, even if it's before that point where you can actually start making a reliable income, it's like if the amount of work that's required to run that, if you can't balance that amount of work with a day job, you'd have to quit your day job.
It definitely which one comes first, right? And we don't know that. Like which one comes first. But you do need like it's either due to a certain time constraint or due to reliable income, and we say, okay, if we were to focus on this full time, we can make it grow.
I think what would be really important is making sure you have enough contacts from your day job and from your experience in engineering to make sure that you have a reliable source of potential clients who would want trusses. Like you'd need to know enough people to actually make sure that you would have.
You could also know a lot of. You could also you'd have to have like some business acumen and reach out to like suppliers. You're like, not your Home Depot necessarily. They probably work with bigger companies, wouldn't even look twice at you. But you're like smaller, like Ace Hardware, your Leo's Castles and stuff. And
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, your Castles and Ace
Right.
Hardware's and like, or Jim Bob's Hardware, right? Like
Right.
Home Hardware even. You start reaching out to like local ones and say like, we're willing to sell trusses. Add us into your like pool of people. Here's our prices. Here's our, and then every week we'll email you time estimates, like, you know, or whatever, right? Like an idea. So when they give quotes, they know how long it would take and stuff, right?
Right.
So there's that element too, which grows in demand at some point too.
Yeah.
Right. But anyway, yeah. So the idea is we'd start off with trusses as a intro to having our own business. That's not necessarily the most exciting business, but it seems like a fairly, you can get an edge if you're a low cost producer. You're not huge, so you can kind of like focus on providing locally to smaller companies, where your bigger trust providers, your big Zytec that's near us, doesn't necessarily care as much to run a deficit trying to compete with us at Ace Hardware and Olds or whatever, right? They're like, fine, have it, kind of.
Well,
right?
So you just built a garage at your house. And you had to get some pre-engineered trusses ordered, right? And you I think you told me there's only a couple sort of large-scale truss manufacturers in Alberta.
Yeah.
Right? So competing with them and maybe your average sort of truss startup might not be the hardest thing in the world, right?
No.
Like,
and like I said, I didn't know how much I paid for my trusses. Like $150 a truss, roughly, right? Rounding around there.
Right.
20 trusses. I had to get
You had 20?
No, 13 trusses.
Okay.
The end ones are a little more expensive because they're gusseted, so they have mine weren't gusseted, so I paid the same price. But typically, anyway. So 13 times 15 is $195.
Okay.
Yeah, 195, or that one. $1,950. Yeah.
Right. Right. For like just your average garage in a backyard.
Yeah,
right?
and so $2,000. And I feel like a contractor could bang out those trusses in a day, maybe with one assistant or whatever. Like, yeah. So you pay them $400, whatever that number is, right? Like $400 or whatever they need. Your material, we did the math before, $1,000 or something, right? Whatever it is, so you make $600 profit.
Yeah.
So your profit margin's 30% or something, right?
Right.
Which is a high profit margin.
I mean, again,
this
like
is back.
We've crunched the numbers very amateurly.
Yeah,
here,
right. This is, we have done it more accurately than this before. We're on the phone and I was Googling how much time it took how much time it takes to build a truss on average. Yeah. Googling, I was actually like running the linear feet on like how much material would be needed for a truss and stuff. But yeah, well, think about it. Lumber, $1 a linear foot, let's say, right? So you have 20 feet across. These are all kind of round numbers, right? Just to give us an idea. Then you have your triangle part, which is going to be on an angle, so it's more than 20 feet. Let's call it 25 feet. Let's call it 30 feet. You're at 50 feet. And then you have like the W bracing inside, right? Your triangle bracing, and it's about a W. Add another 30 feet or whatever, right? Okay. So you're at 80 feet. You have $10 of metal, like bracing and stuff that goes in there. 90. So yeah, about probably like 2/3 of the cost of the truss is the material.
Yeah. And if you can get sort of a deal with some lumber supplier where like you don't have to pay sort of at market price for your lumber, you can buy them in bulk. And
we're okay with ugly lumber too. Like you get the cheapest. Like
sure. Well, if we're going to be planing it all down anyway, it doesn't matter.
You don't need to. It's all framing wood. Yeah, it's framing wood. It's just the way it is. Yeah.
Sure.
So yeah, you get a bit of a deal. So let's say it's $100 a truss. A contractor could bang one out in half an hour. So our profit's $30-$40 a truss or something. Right. In there anyway, right?
So now the question is, would we hire carpenters as employees to work in our warehouse for us, or would we contract them out?
Or the very first few months, do we just make the trusses ourselves?
Well, in the very first 3 months, we're gonna have to be balancing it with our day jobs. True, unless we just quit our day job. I just mean
our demand is so low. We're selling 10 trusses. A week, and we just meet up one evening a week.
What's the point of the warehouse at that point? Like, why would you not? Why would you not first build up your clientele to the point where you actually need a warehouse and you need to start?
So where do we build the trusses otherwise? at a house.
We both have garages.
Yeah.
We both have stuff we can do. Like
Yeah.
we could build the trusses
Yeah,
ourselves.
maybe you don't get a warehouse right away. Maybe that's part of your
Yeah.
full-time venture switch, right? Yeah.
Right.
Right. But I think when it's super inconsistent, you just build them yourself. We won't be as efficient with it, but like if we just met up one evening a week to build 10 trusses, you spend
It'd be
5
like a side
hours.
hustle. It wouldn't be a job.
It's a side hustle. You
It'd be a
spend
side
5 or
hustle.
6 hours
Yeah.
over 1 or 2 evenings or whatever. And
Sure.
every Monday we put together what the orders were the previous week and bang them out, right? Like,
and not only are we gaining money doing that, but we're gaining experience. We're getting potential clients for later
you're gaining
on.
quite a bit of money, right? Like you're doubling your profit by doing that. And it's a side hustle. You're putting work in, so sure, but
yeah. And then now you might be wondering, why do we just do this as a side hustle forever? And it's like what we want is that we want to build a company with assets, right? So we want to buy property, we want to build a warehouse,
we want to hire employees,
right?
We want and we want something that's more challenging and varied too. I think that's the thing too. We don't want to be just designing trusses where most of them are standard trusses, right?
Right.
We want something a little more involved.
So build up a reputation maybe where we can handle. If you just need some standard truss, we can give you that. But if you need some custom design thing, we have the ability to do that as well.
We have talked about that. What's that look like? Do we eventually go into general consulting? Do we consult? I brought up the idea of like just luxury homes, right? And like we hire an architect. We don't even need an architect, but you could hire one. But because in large buildings, you have to engineer.
No, fuck him.
Okay.
Fuck the guy. Sorry.
It's okay. So the idea being that you can, like for a luxury home, tall walls, any wall over 10 feet tall has to be engineered. The trusses have to be engineered. And like if you're doing luxury homes, you're not going to be having standard trusses with them, I doubt. Stairways, doorways, windows, like large windows, I think. All of those have to be engineered, right? Yeah. It's like that's something that you can do that maybe is a decent all right, we're not going to do trusses anymore. We'll keep doing that, but we're also going to start designing luxury homes or something, right? Where you have a little more involvement and variety and stuff. Yes, concrete foundation has to be stamped or whatever too, right? It's like you have half a dozen elements that you have to design yourself, and they will change a bit house to
So
house.
then this is kind of like the second prong of our idea, like maybe.
But you don't do that until you quit your day job, so to speak. Like that has to become your day job.
Well, we can sort of together with our truss manufacturing sort of thing. We could also on the side do some, like you said, private consulting.
Yeah.
Like I've heard of like job boards that you could sign up for, where people like they find like small scale engineering consulting jobs for people to do, and then once you're part of this job board, they can offer these sort of small scale jobs to you.
Yeah.
Right, where you do like private consulting work, like I don't know, design like a garage slab for your average homeowner, shit like that, right? And then sort of again build a reputation, build experience, build a clientele doing that way.
A bit of a portfolio kind of, right?
Yeah, and run that as kind of a separate thing from the truss idea. And
then not combine them, but you're saying eventually take that as a full-time thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the reason we want to build assets with this trust thing is because we want to actually sell. We want to sell our trust firm, and make money off.
In theory,
it,
yeah.
Right. So I don't know, maybe. I don't know, 5-6 years. I'm just throwing numbers around here. We have no idea what it'd be like, but maybe 5 or 6 years after we start the trust thing, we'd sell it. We'd sell a warehouse. We'd sell all the contracts that we've developed, our employees, all of our assets, and make bank. I don't know.
Are you saying just trusses there? Or are you saying the whole consulting firm?
No, so the consulting thing is separate, right? And then once we sell our trust business, then we move into full-time consulting.
Yeah.
Like imagine as if like the trust business is under one name and our private consulting thing is under another name.
Yeah.
And then at the point where we sell our trust business, we go full-time with our consulting thing.
You maybe if no one buys the trust business or we don't get the money, we kind of think maybe what happens is we just hire someone to be the person in charge of that, but we're still the owners, right? We pay them $60 an hour kind of thing,
Yeah.
$100K a year or whatever, right? And like they can be like just an early mid-career PN or something, right?
Yeah.
And they're the
like
ones that kind of work on that, and we just come in, like, we check on things. Maybe we'll sit down for some really complex trusses and get involved and stuff, but the actual like day-to-day operations of it, they deal with, and we get money, and then we almost get the like rent, so to speak, right? Like we get the profit margins. The profit margins are ours.
Yeah. Well, we maintain ownership.
Yeah.
And then we can let the company value accrue if we want.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
maybe that's an equally valid way of doing it.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if we would have to. If we would need to sell the trust company to be able to afford assets for our consulting business. Like if we want to move into like an office, if we want to take our consulting idea and move that into like an office building and actually make that a full-time thing, do we rent an office or do we do the same thing of like we want to buy it and then I don't know.
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah. I guess it sounds like we put some thought into it, right? It's not a simple like, we can get rich and retire. Like we've kind of thought of the angles and how you'd have to go about it and stuff. Mm-hmm. Even like the consulting, depending on what we do, there's like preliminary efforts we could put in to get that set up, right? Like we can kind of get get a website made and stuff. You can do that before you quit your day job kind of thing, right? Like there's basic groundwork you could work on, file for trademarks and stuff. Mm-hmm. Right? Think of a name. But
yeah. And then we'd start off small scale, like you said, start off designing garage slabs for homeowners or whatever.
Yeah, luxury home kind of stuff.
Yeah, and then hopefully once we move to a full-time thing, maybe get an office going, we design bigger scale things like condos maybe, or like you said, luxury homes, that'd be a good one.
I think luxury homes would be a neat one to start with, showing that we're a prestigious company and we're not just designing like a duplex or whatever, right? We design like semi like estate size homes kind of.
And I'm sure coming off of the truss business, we'd have a lot of clients who are like your average home developers, right? Yeah. Because homes have a lot of trusses, right? So
we can talk with the builders and say like we'll be the designers, like we can contract you guys.
Exactly. If you guys have some new development that you're looking into, like we can give you a deal. Yeah. Right? On all the design work. Yeah. I think it'd be a good idea.
I think it's a very feasible thing. And I think the problem, I'm going to go on a bit of a rant kind of. It's like a 2-minute rant. The problem I have, you tell these ideas to people and they say, no, you should just keep your day job. That's too risky. And you say, why is it risky? And they say, well, if it was that easy, everybody would do it. And my problem with that statement is it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. If everyone has that statement, then it could be the easiest. Then if everyone thinks that, then starting a company is actually the easiest thing. Because if no one else is starting a new company, because everyone thinks that, it's actually the easiest thing to do, kind of, right? It only gets hard when it's actually kind of the opposite of a self-fulfilling prophecy almost. The time that starting a company gets harder is when less people think that. But the amount of people that say, if it was so easy, everybody would do it, you saying that means that statement isn't true. Because you're just not wanting to do it because you think it's not because everyone would do it. You're just worried about it, and everyone's just worried. That's why you're not doing it.
Right.
It's not that you're not doing it because it's easier, it's too hard or whatever, right? You're just not doing it because you think more people would be doing it.
You don't want to take on the risk. I think that the element for people not wanting to do that is mostly to do with risk. Like it's like your day job being an employee of a company, that's very stable. Right, all things considered, like you have your salary, you're an employee, you're part of the company.
Like I said, start it as a side hustle and incorporate it. Yeah. And incorporating it limits so much of your risk by default.
For sure. Yeah. And even like more risk, more reward, right? Like you and I are pretty ambitious people, I would say, right? Yeah. So it's like I don't think I'd be content with being an employee forever. I would want to move on to something that would make me more money. Yeah. That would be like cooler, I think, right?
And it's like a legacy too, right? It's a company that someday maybe your kid takes over, you sell to someone, right? But like that name continues to a degree for a bit anyway. Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah. But like I think I would like that more than just like being a private consultant that doesn't really have employees and like when you retire the business just ends. Like it'd be nice to have assets building.
Yeah, which is why I think you and I are putting such a heavy emphasis on like wanting assets, wanting to build our company's value, not just being two people
designing stuff but not hiring or buying land or warehouses.
It's like we want to build the value of the company. We need assets to do that. So it can't just be you and me doing your average.
It's the portfolio, and then it's also your employees are an asset in the way that if you retire, if your employees have been with you long enough and stuff, they carry part of that portfolio as well. Right? Like, yeah. But to do that, you have to get to a decently sized company where you don't just have like one employee, right? Like you want a dozen employees. Right. So that way, even if one or two quit, your portfolio still continues, kind of. Right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So is that kind of it?
Yeah, that's all I have.
Yeah, that's all I have. That was a pretty good one. That was almost 2 hours, wasn't it?
No, hour and a half.
Hour and a half. Yeah, that seems to be kind of where we land usually. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
is there anything else you want to say?
No, we kind of hit it. We got consulting, sort of design work, our idea for a company.
Would you work a government job? That was the one last one I wanted to ask. Yeah.
I don't know if a lot of structural work is actually government done. I feel like most structural, like a lot of the municipal civil work can be government run, but I feel like most of the structural work, if the government needed something, they would contract.
The government work. So the idea with government work is you're often like babied quite a bit. You get paid quite a bit. You get lots of benefits and time off, but your work isn't necessarily the most demanding. And I've heard the argument that companies actually look down, like they don't consider government work as highly when it comes to work experience on the resume.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because they know it's a 36-hour work week. You get like every day off, every like semi-holiday you get off. You get like, you're a bit more pampered, right? Like,
yeah, I haven't heard of that. But
I have heard of that. And that could be, maybe that's a false statement. Maybe it's not true. It's a stereotype is what I mean, right? Like,
yeah.
But I have heard that there's that bias. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it definitely doesn't appeal to me. I'm not out there looking for government jobs.
So the problem with government jobs too is us being ambitious. You wanted a little bit more of a competitive field, right? Where like you would get like performance bonuses, you can move up and stuff. Whereas like government jobs are a union. Literally a union or sort of a union. I think it depends on the municipality or federal. Sure. But the idea is we're hiring for this position, and this position is an E2 payment. And you can type in E2 and it shows the grid. Year 1, E2 is $70,000 a year. Year 2, it's $73,500. Like, it's just a grid. There's no. It almost encourages you to do the minimum amount of work, right? Like, because why put more work in for the same result?
There.
Yeah, there's no incentive to work harder, which is something that I think doesn't speak to me.
If that's how it works, no, that wouldn't speak to me at all. I would want to be putting in extra work so I could get raises, and my bosses could look at me.
It makes you more proud too of what you're doing and stuff, and like a healthy proud.
There's a payoff. Yeah, like you said, you're incentivized to actually do more than just the bare minimum.
Well, that's how capitalism works, and that's the right. Like that is right. Like that's capitalism. It's being ambitious and trying to grow and
being incentivized
to do that,
right?
And that's why capitalism has got us where we are.
Yeah,
for better or for worse. But I personally think for better. Yeah. Okay. Is that it?
There we go.
So there's work. I think this kind of covers it for engineering-related topics.
I think so.
There might be one that we end up wanting to discuss later if one comes up. But in our, I can't think. School, work. That's kind of the two that come to mind. Right?
Yeah, for now anyway. So.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, thanks everyone for tuning in.
And as always, ciao for now.